hear that, sheetheads? That's the sound of a brand new bootylicious anchor ad, heating up the intro with a sensual vibe, so you can start this episode of BREADSHEET nice and soggy. Say, have you got ideas you want folks to hear? Well, nowadays it's titillatingly easy to broadcast yourself with Anchor. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started spraying your brain thoughts out into the ether. That's how I do it, monetization and all. And if it's good enough for Hoss Bossman, well, you know it's gonna leave you satisfied. Now why don't you slip into something a little more comfortable and prepare yourself for this week's edition of BREADSHEET.
You see, darkness in society. It only came because we let the fathers, the monsters, we let them rule. But now, all we have to do is make a BREADSHEET.
Crab smoking a joint. That's at smoking_crab on TikTok. That's right, giving you a TikTok rec today. Crab smoking a joint also has a Twitter, but he seems to not be using it nowadays, so I'll just plug his TikTok here. So it's at smoking_crab. Pretty big deal for me, calling out the person with the best username on the internet, Crab Smoking a Joint. So go give him a follow and stay tuned for our upcoming fist fight at the K&K. Also, please go check out Intellectual Darkwave on YouTube. He's going to be my next guest on the next proper BREADSHEET episode. I've already recorded that interview, so that should be out fairly soon. And he is an awesome musician, does some fun parody stuff, but also like cool, just kind of a little bit of a lot of stuff. So go check that out, give him a subscription, and check out some of his stuff like in preparation for, get stoked about the interview, the episode of BREADSHEET he's going to be on coming up soon. Talked about some interesting stuff in that, and yeah. Today's guest is the amazing Brace Belden of the also amazing TrueAnon Podcast. My name is Hoss Bossman, and you're listening to BREADSHEET.
This is medieval times! Give me back my son! Give me back my son!
Behind the scenes, Bill Gates is literally hopping around like a gremlin.
Is there such thing as insanity among penguins? Try to look a chicken in the eye with great intensity. God bless America. God bless America. The only country in the world where we can do this. The only country in the world where we can do this. They're all so lucky to live here. They're all so lucky to live here. They're all so lucky to live here and be here.
Wake up, little snoozy. Smell and talk. Wake up, little snoozy. Smell and talk.
America.
Turd in the graveyard. Turd in the graveyard.
I honestly did not actually mean to turn my I promise this is going to be a short intro thing I say pretty much every episode into like a shtick, but here we are. I am switching things up a bit around these parts. Firstly, with how I approach the guest's original theme songs, which you'll hear in a sec. And secondly, with these intros. From now on, I am actually going to just introduce the guest, play their theme song, and play the interview, and then an outro. At least that's what I'm telling myself I'm going to do. You know what? I really want to play y'all the theme I made for a new segment on that episode I mentioned, the Lost BREADSHEET. The new segment is called Hoss's YouTube Scraps and Craps. And here's the theme I made for it. I'm just going to play it for you right now.
Hoss's YouTube Scraps and Craps. Hoss's YouTube Scraps and Craps.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. If you haven't already, please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm having a lot of fun making those song breakdowns, little like video essays, breaking down like the lyrics to political songs. And I really do think they keep getting better with every one I make. Also, I just finished recording a guest appearance on Chris Yamaguchi Man and Friends podcast, Jort Center, which was a blast and lasted over 2 hours, I think. That show is great, and even though they started it like a year or two after I started this piece of crap podcast, they have more than twice as many episodes, so they know how to manage their time and content, at least. Go subscribe to the Jort Center podcast. It is fantastic. Also, if you slept on the most recent episode of BREADSHEET I released on January 1st of this year, 2023, go check that out. I realize that a 36-minute reading of a 120-year-old short story isn't the easiest sell for many people, but I promise it's a truly funny and interesting tale, and I'm really proud of how it turned out. The original upload did have some issues, but I fixed it, and if like I were applying to record an audiobook for someone or something, I would submit this as my finest work so far. So go check that out and let me know what you think of that. Alrighty, so my guest today, this is a quicker intro, I think. My guest today is the aforementioned Brace Belden, co-host along with Liz Franczak, I think is how you pronounce that. I think that's a Polish name, of the TrueAnon podcast, who Brace was super friendly and nice and generous with his time and super interesting to talk to. You will laugh, love, and learn during this chat. Very interesting life this guy has had, and some interesting thoughts on stuff. TrueAnon is available wherever fine pods are casted, and they are on Twitter at TrueAnonPod. As I believe I mentioned in this chat, TrueAnon sort of goes back and forth between being a current events, culty, conspiracy adjacent conversation show and being a more produced true crime-ish thing. Like, you know, QAnon is stupid bullcrap, but TrueAnon discusses similar things like powerful perverts doing pervert stuff, but with actual research and smart brains and true stuff behind it. Oh, that's why they call it that. So if you want to learn about real salacious conspiracies, or at least conspiracy theorizing that's founded in reality, or if you're a fan of true crime stuff, but as I do, feel guilty about extracting entertainment value from the misfortune and suffering and death of private citizens, and also if you resent the fact that most true crime crap is insanely padded, like you'll watch some true crime miniseries on Netflix or whatever and realize halfway through that 90% of what you've just been watching has nothing to do with the crime that is true in question and is a bunch of irrelevant background about this random family. TrueAnon scratches the true crime itch with none of those drawbacks of the genre, for me anyway. Mr. Belden's theme song, Mr. Belden. Why did that just ring? Oh, Mr. Belding is the principal from Boy Meets World? Or no, that's Mr. Feeney. Is the principal from Saved by the Bell. Mr. Belding. This is Mr. Belden. Different guy. Mr. Belden's theme song is the very first one I did with my new approach, in which I did some like singing instead of using the clips of them speaking like I've done for all the other ones. I think this is going to be a more manageable and kind of Hoss-specific gimmick moving forward. I'm focusing more on writing and producing the music, actually playing guitar and bass and stuff, and still saving a ton of time, though, because finding, pulling, and editing all those clips was insanely time-consuming. I went with a punk sound for this one, and you will probably understand why after this interview, so I hope you like this song and this interview with the incredible Brace Belden. I'm Hoss Bossman. Please share and review this podcast, and check out my YouTube channel by searching YouTube for Hoss Bossman or going to youtube.com/Hoss Bossman and find all my links at www.hoss.fun for all your Hoss needs. Now, enjoy Brace Belden of the TrueAnon podcast original BREADSHEET theme song, followed by his interview. His song I'm calling Brace Your Balls for Brace Belden. That's not bad. A little alliteration there. All right, here's the song. very audible right now. I hear you loud and
Perfect.
clear.
Excellent. I don't have a mic stand with me, but I'll just hold it.
Okay. Yeah, that I actually had the foresight to bring one with me because, like a lot of people, I'm not at my house right now. Is that are you traveling at the moment?
No, I'm at home, but I actually have a bit different mic set up here, but this one's actually I left my mic stand at the studio, so
Oh,
this
I didn't
thing
even know
is a
y'all
little
recorded at a studio.
yeah, well, it's like a practice space.
Okay.
Like kind of like where bands play and stuff. So it's a studio though.
Like a treated room, place where it's got a little bit of sound.
We put some treatment up, but I got to tell you, it's not very effective. It sounds good for our audio quality, but unfortunately, there's a really shitty that band, the Bad Brains.
Oh yeah.
Well, Dr. No from the Bad Brains' son has a fucking like rap vocal studio a couple doors down that's just like plays the fucking loudest subwoofers ever. So every episode, actually, I'm only like half paying attention because I can just hear the fucking goddamn subwoofers.
But it doesn't get picked up on the audio. I've never noticed it.
No, it doesn't at all. Actually, I gotta grab a jewel pod too, and then I'm ready to rock.
Certainly. I'll grab mine.
There we go.
There, and if you are as frequent of a vapor as I am, I won't feel like such a like weirdo or like.
No, it's totally yeah. It's almost like a tick at this point.
Yeah, I always feel during interviews like I'm like, is this unprofessional? And as soon as I see the person I'm interviewing pick up a vape, I'm like, yes, all right.
No, it's all good.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I love y'all's show, and just fairly like a few months ago, really like started listening to it regularly. I think I found y'all guys. I hear people in the spaces mention the leftist spaces or whatever. Which actually, I think I heard you say that recently on an episode. Something like you said the phrase something about spaces, and
oh yeah.
I totally related to that. Like I found myself saying spaces in that way, like, leftist spaces and stuff.
Yeah.
Saying that now. So I've heard a lot about y'all. And then finally, I really started listening when y'all were doing the Ghislaine.
Ghislaine. It's that's not even actually the correct pronunciation. It's like a French saying it's Ghislaine. It's like Ghislaine or something like that. But I just say Ghislaine. Some people say Ghislaine. It's really my rule is it's a name. Pronounce it however.
Sure. It's all made up anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My very juvenile joke about her name when she was like all in the news was imagine needing a whole lane just for your jizz.
Yes. Yeah. It's like that movie Crash.
But I love y'all's show, and I've been kind of binging it. I paused my binge and kind of skipped forward a bit whenever y'all started talking about the 2020 election.
Yeah.
I do not want to relive that. So I went ahead after that was kind of over with. And y'all, first of all, y'all have really great chemistry. How do y'all know each other? I don't know, like if I've heard any episodes where you really go into detail about like where y'all met.
I feel like, I think we mentioned it a few times, like throughout the years, but not in great detail. But I've known Liz for a long time. We met when we were young, just through music stuff, I think probably at Gilman, something like that. In fact, I'm almost positive at Gilman, and which is like a kind of youth punk club, not like a teen club, but a lot of teenagers go there. In Berkeley, that's like very it was well known in like the 80s and 90s for a bunch of those like pop punk bands got their start there, like Green Day and Rancid and Operation Ivy and stuff like that. It was just all kinds of kind of like punk music, rock and roll, and so there were shows there every Friday and Saturday, and sometimes Thursdays, I think. Although I think generally it's Friday and Saturday, sometimes Sunday matinees. And I went there not every weekend, but there were a lot of shows there, and it was kind of like a consistent place to go. So I met Liz there, but she was kind of interested in the larger group of friends that I had growing up too.
Okay, so y'all both from San Francisco.
Yeah, Bay Area, yeah.
Okay. And I've had a couple of San Fran boys on this show. And speaking of Gilman Street, I'm a big punk rock fan. And that was actually when I first thought, oh yeah, I should probably interview the TrueAnon folks, because I heard y'all mention that you used to go to punk shows a lot. And I kind of try to focus on like music or art and politics and stuff on this show and other stuff I do. I've had a Chris Freeman from Pansy Division.
Oh, yeah, I know Pansy. I mean, I don't know that guy, but yeah.
But Greg Proops, I think, is originally from there, and him a very long time ago.
The comedian?
Yeah, I interviewed. Actually, no, that wasn't for this podcast. That was for a magazine I used to write for. Now about it, but
crazy last name on that guy.
I know it's
Proops. I couldn't hack it.
Well, I mean, speaking of names, you're Brace. What's up with that name? Where's that come from?
It's funny. It's a weird name. It was my great uncle's name, who I knew. He was like one of my dad's side. Not a lot of like living. Like most of his side of his family, like the older people, were dead when my grandma and grandfather died before I was born. But he was kind of like the elder figure on that side of the family. I didn't know him super well. My dad, I think, just liked the name and named me after him. I think it had originally been some like, I don't know, like waspish last name at some point. But then my great uncle was named it as a first name. I don't know what his relationship to, like, I don't know why he was named that, but he was a very old guy. And so I was assuming it's like one of those, to me, it always sounded like one of those kind of old people names, like Rupert or something like that. Like something that. Like some like a merchant would be named that back in, I don't know, 1700s. Brace. But maybe that's because I'm thinking of sometimes things are bundled in like a brace of sticks or whatever like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an unusual name. I've always sort of liked it, and especially it's kind of got an alliterative thing, Brace Belden. But yeah, I know it's funny because it really sounds like a nickname. And so when I was growing up, I had braces, and I think for a long period of time, everybody who I encountered assumed my name was a nickname due to the fact that I had braces. And at one point when I was about 14, my friends and I saw that movie Suburbia, the Penelope Spheris one with like the little punk, it's like a little punk group of kids who live in like, some abandoned house outside of LA, but they had like a little skinhead in their group. And so I was like, oh, we need one of those. And I kind of drew the short straw and I had to become one. And so I had braces. I wore braces as well for about 6 months of my freshman year, or excuse me, I guess I would have been about 6 months when I was like 14, and I looked like a total fool because I still had braces on my teeth. And so even more people assumed it was a nickname.
I could see that, and it's one letter off from Bryce, and at first I thought that's whenever because your co-host Liz has like that Bay Area accent, and I was always thinking, am I hearing the name Bryce as Brace from the way that she's saying it right now? But one letter off from Bryce, and I would say a far superior name to Bryce. I
got to tell you, I mean, no disrespect to any Bryces out there, but I'm not a huge fan of that name. I've been called it so many times too, and I can't remember if I've ever met a Bryce in my entire life.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I can't either. But I definitely picture a certain type of like. I mean, I shouldn't disparage blonde-haired people. I picture like a Winklevoss twin type guy.
It's a Winklevillian name, yeah, for sure.
So, do you have like I guess the name TrueAnon, maybe go into like where that comes from. I have my assumptions about like why you call it that, of course. But do you have like an elevator pitch for TrueAnon? Like if somebody asks you what you do and you have to explain what your podcast is.
It's funny. I mean, it depends on who I'm talking to, because I tend to not want to over explain it to people who are just asking a simple question. I generally tell people that I'm like, oh yeah, I do like a sort of like an independent true crime podcast, which is sort of a funny way to look at it. I mean, I sort of a joke, but that gives a frame of reference for people who aren't super familiar with like maybe the milieu that the show comes out of. But I mean, it started out basically about Jeffrey Epstein, and then we very quickly started talking about other stuff as well, and now it's kind of just I don't know. It's us trying to understand, I guess, the world I feel like I'm a pretty normal guy in terms of like my actually probably subnormal in terms of my education and like the way I understand the world. But basically try to like understand issues that might be kind of complicated or usually involving maybe the darker side of politics or crime, or the mixture of the two, and then talk about it, research them as much as possible, and talk about it. It's basically all I do with my life.
Oh well, you do a good job with it, I'd say. And the true crime thing, that actually is kind of like fitting from when I started that series. I think it was maybe a re-upload that you did about that weird ass TrueAnon stuff.
Oh yeah.
That like listens very much like a true crime type, like the way that the narrative is laid out and all that stuff.
Yeah.
When I've recommended the show to people, I've told them like, if you like true crime, but like me, you feel like guilty about like deriving like entertainment pleasure from like some horrible thing about like some family that did not ask to be like have their story told or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
This is, it's kind of like the TrueAnon podcast is sort of a way to indulge that a little bit, but actually like learn about something that's actually true and esoteric and interesting.
Well, it's funny because I think that is the problem that people run into with like true crime podcasts, and like that is always with not even just true crime podcasts, other things too. Like whenever you're talking about anybody, I guess there's some sort of responsibility there. But like this one's easy because it happened to me, and so it's like, yeah, I can easily tell the story.
For sure. And some of the other stuff I've listened to, the production value, like it's like your show, it goes back and forth between being like an interview, conversation, sort of talking about the news show, to like the these little like mini series and stuff on like just various topics. Where did the idea for that come? Is Young Chomsky your mysterious producer? Is he the one who kind of does all that production glossy stuff?
Well, he does. Yeah, he does all the technical stuff. I mean, we all basically. It really depends on the project, but like, yeah, I mean, Liz and I usually focus on like always focus on like the writing and like researching, and we don't do scripts per se. I mean, we actually kind of did for the game series, like the Synanon stuff, but usual episodes, it kind of depends on how complicated the topic is and how much we just know off the top of our heads. But we usually do like kind of like bulleted notes or like things that we want to hit on, and then maybe like details, usually about 5 to 20 pages of notes per episode. And then Young Chomsky does all the production. Basically, like he records it, edits it, writes music, and puts it out.
Right on. Yeah, that, and I mean, he does a great job with that, like making
he's
it
good.
Yeah, and so he makes the music. Does he like do it in like Logic or something like that?
No, he's got like a full synth like setup and all that kind of stuff. We've had guest music too, but not for kind of a while. It's mostly been him doing it. Like he wrote the theme song's a cover, but he recorded it and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, we've collaborated. I kind of come from like a music scene, and so I'm always happy to have like people that I know like do guest music and stuff like that.
So are you a musician? Did you play in bands, or were you more of a fan, always went to the shows type?
No, I played in bands from a pretty early age. I played in a kind of like hardcore punk band when I was a teenager that for our scene was one of the like, I guess, B tier bands of like the which was cool. We put out 2 7-inches, an LP. I think we're on like 1 or 2 compilations. And then I was in a kind of like a garage rock band, really a punk band, but we kind of played a lot with garage rock bands. We put out a couple of 7-inches. And then I played in various other projects and stuff like that. I sort of like when I got in some trouble about 10 years ago, I sort of stopped playing music as much. I had some musical equipment stolen and wasn't able to, purchase any new stuff. It kind of put me back on my musical career. But I don't really think of myself as a musician. Like I kind of just like played it. That was, and it still is like a pretty big part of my life. I go to shows all the time, and almost all of my friends actually are from that that kind of scene, I guess.
Okay, yeah. I'll ask you a few more specific kind of art music questions in a second, but let's get a couple more kind of profile-y type things to ask. Your family. I understand you grew up in San Francisco, very at least like socially progressive kind of area, or at least has a reputation for that. Was your family also progressive, liberal? Like, are your current politics? I guess what I'm asking, a reaction against that stuff, or more of a leaning into?
It's funny. Like when I was a kid, the Bay Area is very liberal. My parents weren't particularly political. My stepmom certainly not. My dad, he was like an Obama guy. He had been kind of a radical in the '60s, but not super committed to it or anything. I did sort of react against that when I was a kid. I was like, this stuff is so fucking stupid. Like, I'm like, that's like San Francisco. And, I lived outside of San Francisco too, in a few different places in North Bay. And, it's all very like Democrat run, very liberal, all that kind of stuff. And I really chafed me from a young age, for a lot of pretty juvenile reasons. I would say my politics now, and what they have been for a pretty long time, I wouldn't say it's really a reaction against that any more than those politics originally started as sort of a reaction against, or a revolution against liberalism. But no, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that my politics, the fact that I have the politics that I do have, my growing up contributed to that, but it's kind of hard to actually pinpoint what I guess the influence is, because I just read some books and I was like, oh, this stuff seems to make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that did. I watched like a little featurette, I guess this is called, like a video that Huffington Post put up. That was like a little interview with you. They I think you mentioned something along those lines in that video. And actually on that subject, it seems like a lot has happened in your life in the past like 5 or 6 years. You probably, when I first was like kind of looking up you as an individual, I was thinking like he's probably been asked about this a lot and answered a lot. If you want to give like a short version or whatever of like how you of that, you volunteering to go over to Syria, and like what was that all about? And because I think most people would hear that and be like, what? How do you do that? What does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was about 6 years ago now. Yeah, I mean, it was 2016, 2015. I got really obsessed. I was reading the story of this woman, Ivana Hoffman, German woman who died in the siege of Kobani alongside this unit of Turkish communists called the MLKP, who were fighting under sort of the umbrella of the YPG in Syria. And she died there, and I got sort of obsessed with reading about her, and I was like, wait, I could do this. And so I figured out a way to send some emails to a email address. I figured out how to like do encryption and all that kind of crap, which God knows who knows how to. I could not even teach myself how to do that now. I have no idea how I did that. Yeah, and then I went over there, and I was there for about 6-7 months, and then I don't know. It was interesting. Sometimes it was very boring. Sometimes it was very scary. Sometimes it was kind of exciting. And then, then I came back. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy how long ago it was now, but it was a very pivotal moment, I guess, in my life.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, that do you have any like I'm sure you follow what the goings on over there probably more closely than most. Any like, and I have to admit, that's something I don't really. It's hard enough to just keep all those abbreviations.
Totally, straight. Yeah. There's a lot of them out there.
What is or how would you characterize like the current situation over there?
A complicated one. When I was over there, it was sort of, although I didn't know it, kind of like I when I went over there, there was the people I fought with a YPG, and then I was later in a Turkish unit that was underneath the YPG. We thought, well, I was under the impression that there was like three cantons, they call them, basically like 3 zones of control. And the westernmost one, Afrin, was disconnected from the other 2. That area was controlled both by ISIS and the Turkish army and its attendant militias that, are ostensibly from Syria. And the thinking was that we would go in like a huge push to connect the cantons. That changed, or it didn't, I don't know if it changed, but that's not what we did. We actually ended up going south towards Raqqa. It basically, they sort of pushed ISIS out of Raqqa. ISIS kind of lost its last major stronghold, doesn't really have any like actual territory as such, and sort of transformed into more of a guerrilla movement. But after that, things got pretty complicated because the Turkish army rather, really does not like the YPG because they view them as an offshoot of the PKK, Workers' Party of Kurdistan, which has been waging a guerrilla war in Turkey since like the 1960s. And so the Turkish army would constantly like make these incursions over the border because it's, they're directly on the border facing each other. In the sort of intervening years, there's been both an increased U.S. military presence and then the increased Turkish military presence. Now, they're both in NATO, but they're sort of on opposing sides of this. But then also the Russian military has come to reinforce both the Kurds and the Syrian army, which is like, I guess, the central government's army, who have also taken up positions on the border, sort of as a buffer between the Turks and the Kurdish area, in order to prevent the Turks from taking more territory and moving, again, their attendant militias in, which are real, basically like criminal / jihadist gangs. And so now you have essentially the armies from 3 pretty major military powers, the U.S., Russia, and Turkey, in a very, very small area with each other. And then you also have the Syrian army, which is, considerably less well equipped than any of those other ones, but still a real government's army. Then you also have the Kurds, who are, have this rather massive militia. And then you also have these sort of like various jihadist gangs as well on the Turkish side. And so you have a lot of different armed groups. And the situation as it is right now, sort of a stalemate. The Turks really want to take more territory and create what they call a buffer zone, and basically like take over essentially all the major cities that the Kurds hold on the border area. So it's a sort of dangerous situation.
Sounds like, every time I start, reading about something that just about anything going on in that whole region.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I need to read like 9 books just to understand like the background of this.
There's just a lot of different fucking groups, basically, is what it is, and that makes everything really complicated.
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess thank you for your service.
No, it's not like that, but it's I'm glad I did it. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about some of it, but it was a pretty important part of my life, I guess.
Right on. Yeah. This morning I showed that Huffington Post video to my girlfriend, just like, hey, you think of anything I might want to ask him about or whatever. And there's a guy I'm interviewing today. And she was just like, her reaction was just like, that takes some like huge balls to just like go overseas and do something, like to volunteer to do something like that. That's like, you don't have like, a direct personal connection to or whatever. And, I won't go into detail on it. And, I have a little bit of a little bit of knowledge about being an addict. I'll just say that. And I teach high school, so I try not to go into too much detail on that stuff publicly.
Totally.
But I could totally see the mindset for me. Like if it were from my perspective, like coming from my background, it's like the idea of like your life not having as much like immediate value to you or something like that. Like I could see being willing to take more of a risk. Like myself personally, I think like probably for the rest of my life, I will be a little bit more or a little less risk averse than like the average person, because I have that like somewhere in my brain of like, I just lived like that for so long,
Yeah. I guess I figured I was just living on, I don't know. I'm kind of living on borrowed time. So, but I'm pretty good at gauging risk as well. I got in some pretty bad situations growing up, and then in my, I guess early 20s. And so I don't know, I've kind of a sense for what I can take and what I can't. Sure.
Yeah. Well, that is a very good skill to have when you're not as risk averse, I guess. As the average person, right? So I guess we can move on to talking about political art and punk stuff. Good timing for that. So so I try to, like I said, kind of talk about like the relationship between political, the NPR-ish way of saying it, the intersection of politics and art. And I guess the first thing, like, what do you have any opinion on like the policing of what is and isn't art? Like, what do you think about that question? Really, how would you answer it? And do you think it's even a question that makes sense to ask? Like, what is art?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I have very little. I'm not much of, I guess, a cultural critic. Like I don't think about art in as I don't know how to describe it, but I'm not very well versed on how people talk about it. It's sort of one of those things like I know what I like and I like what I like, but beyond that, I don't really have like a firm grasp. Like I don't know how to answer that question. It's one of those things where it's like I know it when I see it. I think that sometimes people overthink the question, like on especially when it comes to politics. And I think that like something that I've noticed about people maybe a generation younger than mine is that they think about the intersection of art and politics much more than I did. But I also don't consume large swaths of popular art. Like I don't really watch movies, I don't really watch TV, and I think that's like a lot of people's main interface with artistic things. And I'm also not like, I'm not huge on visual art. I don't know very much about it. I mean, I know some stuff that I like. So I don't know. I guess my main things would be like I read a lot of novels and I listen to a lot of music. And a lot of the music that I listen to, I mean, some of the punk stuff might be like ostensibly political, but generally not very intelligent about it. Novels more so. But I think what makes something art to me is, again, like I know when I see it.
That's pretty similar to, I think a lot of people answer that question is like, I mean, if a single person thinks of it as art, then it is,
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, it's a terminological question really at its core, right? Like remember seeing something when Noam Chomsky, I don't know if he's still doing this, but there was like a year or so where it just seemed like he was like, all right, I'm gonna be dead real soon, so I'm just gonna take every single interview request I get. Showing up on these like little tiny people's like YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff. But I was watching one of those interviews and he mentioned somebody asked him like, do you think Trump is a fascist? And he was like, well, I mean, that's a terminological question. It's not really like, it doesn't have a lot of substance to it. And I thought that was like really perfect because when he first said terminological, I thought of the terminal. Like I thought of that as being like, it leads nowhere basically.
Yeah. Terminus.
Yeah. And so that was like my first interpretation. I then realized like, oh, he's talking about like terminology, but both of them fit that like so perfectly, right?
Yeah.
It's such a like easy thing to get into arguments over with like you're completely like missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, you end up just like whiffling around semantics.
So, in that case, and so, that question of like what is and isn't art, and especially since I mostly like interview, people on the left, generally they have a very, very open, progressive idea of how to answer that question.
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of art fucking sucks, but that doesn't make it not art.
Yeah, I think that is kind of more of a just conservative default perspective, is to say that anything I don't personally like is not real art or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like that, like stupid, the thing that people always point to, that banana taped to the wall in Art Basel, or Basel, however you pronounce it. Like, I mean, that is art, undeniably. It just might be stupid. Most art for the most part. I mean, I know a lot of artists, and I know some pretty successful artists, and the thing is, like, it's funny when you get to a certain level of success as an artist, your art no longer becomes primarily thought of as art. It primarily it's thought of as like either a collector's item. Essentially, that's how it's treated, as the collector's item, or as a way to park money for rich people. And so it's funny because art transforms at a certain level from something that's like, maybe purely art for art's sake, and maybe someone purchases it, but it's still like it's still art, and that's its primary form, or I don't know how to describe that, but like that's what it's primarily is. And then at a certain level of renown or whatever you get as an artist, your art actually transforms into an investment vehicle.
Yeah, I mean that's the interaction of capitalism with art, right? That introducing like money into anything that's like that obviously like messes with the purity of it or whatever. And so as far as like political art goes, I mean, you mentioned being into punk. I'm very much like some of the things that I've heard you mention are like, kind of parallel to like I got into punk music, started playing guitar and stuff when I was around like 12 years old, and that was my initial like exposure to like radical leftist politics, was listening to like Bad Religion and Pennywise and those kinds of like 90s or big in the 90s kind of skate punk type bands. And that's, still I listen to Bad Religion all the time, and it's probably my favorite band if I had to pick one. What kind of like punk music, like what kind of stuff did you initially get into, and like can you kind of just maybe trace the evolution of that?
Well, I initially got into like really classic punk, I guess, like Ramones, New York Dolls, Sex Pistols, all that kind of stuff when I was like 12 years old. I had been sort of into like mostly older heavy metal and some newer heavy metal back then. Like I was really into Black Sabbath and Ozzy and all that kind of stuff when I was like 11, 12. Then I got into punk, and I was sort of introduced to this kind of like generic, like anti-authority sentiment. And then, I got more into like, I guess bands, from the 80s and stuff like that, Black Flag and, all that kind of stuff. And some of those had more, I guess, well thought out political positions than others. But in general, a lot of it was kind of just like this sort of like generic, like almost individualistic at times, like or very individualistic at times, kind of like anti-authority sentiment. But I would say for the most part, I didn't actually really glean any politics from the punk music itself or like the bands really, but just that general scene I was in had a lot of like kind of highly political people in it. Funnily enough, it was a politics that I now vehemently pretty much disagree with, anarchism. I'm not a big fan. But I was in so many like, anarchist, book fairs and fucking, info shops and stuff like that kind of growing up, that just became sort of like part of something that was, I guess my teenage years that I grew to understand very well as I mean, I wouldn't claim that I understood anarchism very well back then, but I was just like, that was just something that was just like around all the time. But and then I went to like the Iraq War protests, and generally there was like this like I don't know, this political element to what was going on, but it was definitely not my main focus. I was mostly focused on getting attention and being an asshole. And so that was really like I mean I was a teenager, very very much a teenager. And it wasn't until I got to my late teens that I actually seriously started listening to, or excuse me, like learning about politics. But funnily enough, like, yeah, I mean, even now thinking about it, none of the bands I really listened to back then, the band that probably is the closest politics that I have is the Dicks from Texas, the old 80s band. But beyond that, I was just like, I think it helped me grow up really used to being around like very political people and sometimes insane people, and sometimes people who were insane because of their politics. But I didn't really have I didn't learn about capitalism in any real way. I just learned that it was bad, and sort of like I think it was kind of the same thing as people. You ever meet people who like clearly got their entire politics from like seeing memes.
Sure.
And like it was a more dignified version of that, I guess, where I was just like, yeah, fuck capitalism or whatever. I was like, if you would ask me to explain what capitalism was back then, I'd be like, I don't know. But and then probably would have said something rude to distract from the fact that I didn't know. But I didn't start seriously like learning about it until I was older. But I was very much focused on sort of pursuits of drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff, and so that was really my main focus. And any of the political stuff kind of just provided me a backdrop in which I could get drunk.
Sure. So something to sort of like to rebel against. Yeah, and that, I would say that the juvenile, like a lot of the music that I still like and listen to is, would say, has kind of a juvenile or shallow, maybe political, fuck the system sort of message. But in a way, I get, the parallel that comes to mind is like gangster rap of like,
absolutely.
It's not really about like, is this good or bad or right or wrong? Like the point is like, this is an accurate depiction of like what this person is going through or what this person, this artist like feels inside.
But my thing is always the number one question when encountering like music or art or whatever for me is always, is it good? You know what I mean? Like, is it like a lot of stuff that has really stupid lyrics or maybe juvenile or whatever, it can be good. And so it's like that's my main focus. A lot of bands I listen to probably have politics that I think are really stupid or whatever. I still can love them, I have always been able to kind of it's funny, when I was older, I encountered people talking about separating art from the artist. I've always been able to do that because a lot of artists I've met in my life are fucking idiots, and they still make good rock and roll. And so it's like, I still listen to it. And so, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. I guess like I could name there's Bad Religion. Propaganda is a band I would say that like still and managed to pretty consistently have like very sophisticated politics while still having like interesting like personal poetic things in their lyrics, and we're actually like you could like read their lyrics and like get informed about things. I remember hearing the Propaganda guy, like I think their newer stuff has way better lyrics because it's a lot more poetic and less like prosaic, I guess, than the older stuff. He mentioned something like in an interview where he's talking about like, I guess this was like the point, and with this album or whatever is like when I stopped writing so many songs about the COINTELPRO papers and crap like that and started actually like writing about how I felt about things, and that like really opened things up for him. So like on that note, another thing is like Anti-Flag. Their stuff is like really, really the opposite of like poetic, a lot of it. But I think like I was obsessed with them when I was younger, and they exposed me to a lot. I mean, it's like straight up propaganda. Some of their stuff is just like this song. We're just going to name it after a book that we want you to read.
Yeah.
Which I think that has its place.
That's a pretty good. It's a pretty good. It's funny. I remember. Propaganda was like a Fat Records band, I think. And I was never. I kind of was into like a little different stuff than that, but I remember hearing about them. And Anti-Flag, I think my brother was into when I was a kid, and like, yeah, those were like very like, those were like the political ones, kind of. I feel like of that scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more like. Yeah, like the pop punk ish kind of more like a little bit more of like pop punk sprinkled on top of it, you know. Yeah, and I mean, I would highly recommend, like, I've mentioned this to people before, like when I bring up Propaganda, talking about political music, but they're you know, they kind of went from a sort of harder edged pop skate punk type band to I remember like they released a new album and I was like, this is too like metal for me. Like they got really, really heavy and a lot like more, you know, musically sophisticated and interesting in my opinion. And and it wasn't like till years later I was like, I'm gonna try give Propaganda a try again. It was almost like I had to like know more about music and have more exposure to like more stuff in order to be like able to appreciate how like sophisticated it is.
Yeah.
So I'd highly recommend, like, you know, any of their newer albums if you haven't heard the pre, you know, when they were like on Fat Records, and kind of sounded more like they were on Fat Records.
Well, it's funny when I got older, I got much more into like I really like a lot of sort of like older British folk music now, and like my tastes have expanded quite a lot since I was younger, but I still listen to a lot of punk music.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing for me. I actually remember specifically, like I joke, but it's only really kind of a joke that I went through like a maybe 4 or 5 year phase when I was a teenager that like in any music that wasn't political was like stupid bullshit for babies or whatever.
Yeah.
And then like I remember my sister let me hear Ben Folds that song "Gone" by him, and for something clicked with me like, oh, music about a girl or whatever can be awesome.
Oh, I love music about girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Kiss.
Really? You Kiss fan?
Big Kiss fan. Yeah. I love Kiss. My favorite band of all time is Thin Lizzy, but I mean, I kind of just like a ton of shit. Like I've been, Yeah,
same here. That and you know what you mentioned earlier about you know, some bands are bad at being political and some are better at it. Like, I mean, what do you think is like what's the difference between, and I guess, you know, you could kind of expand it out to think about it in terms of like where what makes good political art, and you know, does it have to also be like effective political communication, or like what is the difference between bad and good political art?
It's funny, I'm actually really struggling to think of a band that I like that are actual effective political communicators. You know, like I mentioned the Dicks from Texas. They were a band I think started about 78, 79. Fat gay lead singer who is sort of a legend. He actually ended up moving to San Francisco, but you know, openly gay. I think he sort of did performances in drag, which is, you know, is Austin, but still Texas in 1980, pretty out there. They were Maoist, and their lyrics I think are, you know, some people have some problems with them, but I think they're a great band. I would say they're effective political communicators because they sometimes, well, depending on the song, but they communicate concepts in language that I think is easy to understand for people who aren't familiar with the I guess the basis for it. You know, you know, I guess the big like people that people always think of are like the 60s folk singers, but like it's funnily enough, like I think Bob Dylan's like maybe a little too poetic and like really not like, I mean, there was sort of just a generic anti-war thing from Dylan. Like a lot of people, it was a big flip-flopper, and you know, like Masters of War and all that kind of shit, which I think is a great song, but I don't know if it you know, it qualifies as effective political communication. But I think the funny thing is like, with art, especially with art, like, you know, where you're basically just like writing, you know, lyrics are, not rather than like maybe a painting or something with a lot more subtext that or like a lot more room for subtext and stuff like that, is necessarily pretty, there's an element of the vulgar propaganda that you really have to imbue it with, or that it just has to be vulgar propaganda. And that's hard to always do in a way that is artistically effective. I'm like, a lot of the bands I like are frankly like pretty non-political, or at least ostensibly non-political, regardless of any band members' personal politics or anything like that. I honestly can't really give you an answer of like who I find to be actually effective politically. I guess Screwdriver. I mean, it's really bad politics, but they were certainly very open about theirs, and they were for the white power movement in England, propagandistically very effective. Sure. There was a huge, it's a really interesting phenomenon to sort of look at like the 1980s Nazi skinhead scene in England, because it was huge. And it was not only huge, but it was well funded and actually had like its roots in a really large political movement, which was the National Front. And so you had these kind of bands that were not necessarily played on the radio, but playing to very large groups of people, and also in conjunction with this big political movement. Whereas on the left, you had a sort of reaction against that with Rock Against Racism, because Screwdriver was on a label called Rock Against Communism, which is not a great label name. I think Rocko-Rama and then Rock Against Communism. And then Rock Against Racism really took off and got big. I mean, and all sorts of big band, Clash and stuff played it. But it didn't congeal into like a really coherent political movement. I mean, there was a pretty widespread reaction to the National Front stuff and like a pretty big anti-racist movement, but it wasn't a sort of like, there wasn't like a, we're the socialist whatever party and this is like our bands and our movement. Whereas the Nazi, like the white power scene did have that. Of course, owing to the fact that all those people are fucking insane, freak Nazis, it fell apart. But it's, I can't really think of any, like, especially in America, any like bands or anything like that, but I'm not super familiar with a lot of rap stuff, so maybe that's the case with them, but it's not really, I don't think, because there isn't really a big coherent political movement of any type in America that's kind of outside of like the the two-party system, a big one at least. I mean, there are many small ones, but yeah, maybe I'm digressing a little too much here, but it's interesting to think about like music in conjunction with like real boots on the ground politics and like movement bands, I guess. And so like, you had, I guess, like Bernie Sanders was doing, you had like the Strokes and stuff played a concert for him, but it wasn't like there was like a whole bunch of bands, surrounding a coherent political movement or anything like that. And in America, kind of incoherence is a really crucial part of our politics. And so that isn't really a big surprise. I know in other places,
do what you need to do. I wanted to apologize. I see me like looking around here because I have not gotten up this whole time and I don't know where my vape is. So I imagine it's probably
Do you want to look for it?
So give me just a second.
Yeah. I'm gonna grab something real quick. Did you find it? You find it?
I did. As a vapor, you probably had the experience many times where it's like you're vaping and all of a sudden you're like, where is it? And
literally happens to me constantly. I actually immediately recognized what you were doing when you were looking around because I do that same thing.
Okay, good. Yeah, I it's like somehow I was sitting on it. I don't know how that happened, but
I can pick up where I left off basically.
Certainly.
In the third world, there's often been like musical, like pretty big musical components to social movements as well. Like in Turkey, Group Yorum, which is like a big sort of a big communist aligned band. In fact, like a really large band in the country, but they're explicitly a communist band, would play these giant concerts and stuff like that. In Africa, a lot of the liberation movements featured musically. I had large musical components rather. It's really only like America has kind of like not incorporated that as much, but also our political development has been very different than a lot of other countries, especially countries in the periphery. And so I don't know, it's interesting to see that like there hasn't really been, I mean, there's like these like individual musicians that'll say like, oh, I'm a whatever or whatever, like some guy will be like, I'm an alt-right guy, or like I'm a socialist or whatever, but like there hasn't really been any bands that have like had really a coherent politics around their art, or at least, I mean, they're I'm sure I'm overlooking something here, but yeah, it's really different on the periphery, I would say.
Yeah, that's, I mean, like so many things, America has a very kind of weird relationship to that. You mentioned something earlier. I wanted to make sure I kind of like ask you to flesh out a little bit, which is I pretty much have only heard y'all say that you're Marxists on the podcast as far as like what your specific sort of political affiliation is. My politics are, I was just kind of saying broadly a leftist, and I hope that 1,000 years from now we have full communism, and whatever we have, the sooner the better, but whatever kind of steps we could take to get closer to that, so I don't really have like a good like theoretical framework, I'd say, for my politics outside of just what from listening to other people and occasionally like reading books about it and stuff. What would you say? Like you mentioned that band was kind of which band was that you said were a Maoist? The Dicks. Okay. That and that you said that you were kind of simpatico with their politics. Yeah. A lot of Americans hear you're a Maoist or that you sympathize with that, and that sounds very scary to them. So could you like maybe I don't know, give a little more detail as to what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, next to Van Jones, I'm the most well-known Maoist in America. Van Jones used to be a Maoist.
Is that right? I had no idea.
Yeah, not for a long time. I'm just kidding there, but yeah, I mean, so. Well, there's a couple things I want to say about that. One is that like while we do definitely say like we're Marxists in the show, we try not to I don't know, harp on it, I guess, that much, because I think what I want is a lot of people to listen to the show, and I would like my politics to get across in the show, but I don't want it just like the people who broadly agree with me on everything to be the only people listening to our show. And so like we try not to think of ourselves, in fact, pretty from the beginning, although we've been pretty bad at this, but we're not like a left-wing podcast. We're a podcast made by left-wing people, but we're not like the Communist Power Hour or whatever. Obviously, in the subjects that we cover, the politics comes through, and they're sort of expressed by the stuff that we cover, I guess the stuff, things that would broadly interest people on the left, but also interest normal people too. I'm not a very dogmatic guy. Well, that's not true sometimes, but I'm not as dogmatic as other people I have known. My politics, I guess you could say, are Maoist, and I do belong to groups that I guess would share those politics, and I do political work along those lines, and I in particular I support rhetorically, of course, support groups that have that political position internationally, and not so much nationally. American Maoist groups are often full of insane people. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I used to talk a lot more about my politics. And now I think on the show, I especially try to it's not like alienate people. It's just like, I don't want someone to be like browbeaten by me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be like lecturing people like, this is what you fucking have to believe every week and stuff like that. A lot of my friends, none of my friends are fucking, that's not true. But 90% of my friends aren't Maoists, even if they are, communists or something like that. And so, I try not to basically like spend every episode like lecturing people or anything like that. But yeah, I think that essentially the world is, dictated by class struggle, and I think that also there is a struggle between the first world and the third world. And that third world countries, which form the I guess you could say like the rural area of the world, you might think of it like underdeveloped areas of the world. It's a massive swath of the world. In a way, essentially surround the urban, I guess you could call it, core, and that they have a united interest, not only in their own interests, right? But also in the interest of the furtherance of the survival of humanity, in overthrowing sort of the dictatorship of these first world countries. But also, that would free the toiling masses and the peasants and workers in all nations.
I think you kind of got to a good place of like what is and isn't effective political communication, or at least one idea behind it, right? Is that just by being someone who is making something, which I would consider podcasting a form of art, like somebody who's putting something out there that is drawing in people from various places, and then just kind of giving a snapshot of like what a person who has these political views is like, or something like that. I remember like years ago, or a couple of years ago, I interviewed Chris Crofton, who's a great musician, comedian from Nashville, or based out of Nashville. I asked him if you like any political art, and he was like, Prince. Like, I know Prince doesn't sing about politics, but just by being Prince, he's political.
Interesting.
And yeah, I think just like showing people, I would say like that, just help art in general, just like helps people cultivate their imaginations and, be more creative, which is like, I'd say that is, I'm biased coming from being an artist, but I'd say lack of imagination is probably one of the biggest issues we have with politics, at the moment anyway.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with that.
So, would you say that, just to kind of put a bow on the Maoist thing, what would you say is like the defining like difference between like Maoism and I guess Marxist-Leninism? Stalinism isn't really a thing. What would you say the difference is between that, or like between that and like just being I would say I am just kind of generic leftist?
Well, I'd say there's probably I'd say there's differences between all three things. The primary difference between Marxism, traditional Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism would be, well, there's both tactical and theoretical differences. The tactical differences are sort of the ones that, well, no, they're both pretty well known, but the tactical differences is that Maoism often relies on a strategy of what is called protracted people's war, which is both a method of political mobilization and a method of guerrilla warfare. Essentially having what are called like rural base areas. This changes from place to place. But in the case of China, making your base of operations for a communist insurgency in a rural area, using your base of support as the peasants, which was the case for Mao, and really, and it's funny because Marxism, Leninism, this is also did occur in the Soviet Union, but it was much more theoretically emphasized under Mao in the Chinese Revolution. But the alliance between the rural peasantry, of which China had many, I mean, that was the majority of Chinese people back then. Alliance between rural peasantry and the industrial urban proletariat. In Maoism, rather, there is a greater emphasis, I would say, on the peasantry than there is in Marxism Leninism. I think this is actually pretty uncontroversial. But it's not like a. I guess the relationship between the two things would be that people who are like, I guess followers of Maoism, and again, like, I'm not like the most dogmatic guy in the world. If I see something I think that works, that's what I think of. That's what I'm into. But I guess the reason that this has been employed so much in nations like India and in the Philippines and in China and in various South American nations is that that Maoism has this emphasis on the rural peasantry, right? And in a lot of these countries, there is there's almost like a semi-feudal political and economic system in the countryside, with these large landlords essentially acting the same way that they might have in like the 1600s, 1500s, right? Where capitalism hasn't even really fully been implemented, barely been implemented, and Maoism, or Maoists rather, sort of believe in harnessing the power of the rural masses, and that has been effective in some places and ineffective in other places. I mean, that's sort of when Maoism became codified. That was like people were basically it's a relatively newer phenomenon. That was because people have basically said that Mao's strategy actually is like a universal thing that will work in not just the Chinese context, but in all contexts, or not all contexts, but it can be universalized in basically any third world country, which I do essentially believe. I mean, not any, but most. And a lot of these tactics are effective. Like, I think protracted people's war is absolutely that is except in like core nations. Like, I don't think you could really do that in like America and under current conditions. But I think that you could do that in most countries where there is either a weaker state or less of a reliance on like these urban areas. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of all over the place here, but yeah. And then I think for me, I think it's really important to have something that like you basically build your politics off of, And so like for me, like Marxism made sense when I read about it. And then Marxism, Leninism also makes a lot of sense. And then I can actually look at history and see like how these theoretical concepts played out in the practical reality. And some things work, some things don't work, and you learn from that. I mean, the thing about my belief in Marxism is that it's something that that you're constantly learning through. I think that's why I'm kind of against dogmatism and being stuck in sort of like a static thing where like, well, this worked at this point one time, so this will always work. And it's like, no, but you actually have to like Marxism is a way to view the world, is a way to learn about the world. And so that's what I try to do. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's why it's a framework, right? So you have to be able to lay it over. Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And it's not something that you can just. It's something that you use as a tool of learning yourself, right? And as a method of analysis. And I am not a very educated guy, and so for me, it was really useful to help me actually have like ways to understand the world, Yeah, and it's funny because people have long called Marxism a sort of religion, when actually I think it's quite the opposite from how a lot of people, I guess, use religion, which is this like static, totally unshakable set of beliefs. Whereas for me, Marxism is something that's you're constantly reassessing how you view the world and reassessing the things that you learn, and I don't know. I'm a fairly stupid guy in it, so for me, it's like a really good way to like actually help myself learn things.
Well, I mean, I would say, that you definitely come across as very learned and intelligent on your podcast.
I'm cunning. That's what it is. I have cunning.
Fun fact, I felt kind of awkward here because I can see cunning being used anti-Semitically, and Mr. Belden is Jewish. I almost commented on it jocularly, but I was too scared. I think it would have been fine though. I would have said something like, whoa, that sounds pretty anti-Semitic, man, calling a Jewish man cunning, like that. He probably would have found it amusing. Wouldn't that have been great? Oh, well.
Well, I mean, I think cleverness, maybe, I don't know, you're quick on your feet. I mean, that makes for a very good, especially, the type of podcast y'all do, being able to, you always like have a joke ready, which I'd say requires like a lot of intelligence and doesn't get a lot of credit
Instinct.
for that. There you go. And honestly, like your show is so well researched, which is something that one of the first things I heard about it. I remember people saying like, yeah, the show, it's like really funny, but it's also super informative and well researched, and I think that's very true.
Well, that's good to hear, because that's what I spend all of my time doing.
Well, like I said, it definitely shows.
And it's like we should just hire somebody or something. But then my problem is I have to know it myself, or I feel like a fucking idiot. And because I like just like talking about something, as opposed to like reading a list of facts. And so it's like if I can't talk about something, then I get so nervous that I'm like I have to. I think a completely insane way of approaching my podcast, which is totally untenable. But somehow we've been able to ten it.
Yeah, well, same with me. I'm trying to figure out a way to release more often than like once a month, because I have a full-time job, but like I always make these like intros and stuff, and it's like I can't stop like messing with it until I have turned it into basically like an art project every episode. So and in fact, like one of the things I decided early on, I'm going to make my gimmick, every guest is going to get their own theme song. So I'm going to make you a theme song.
Oh, incredible. You're going to write it?
Well, what I've been doing, is, for the past couple of years I've been doing the show is, I've been making a piece of music, that I'm inspired to make for this person, and then like taking clips of them from shows and, auto-tuning them and doing various things with them like that. But recently I kind of decided like I'm going to try, just because it's just more what I'm a songwriter. So like I'm going to try actually like writing a song, like a little something silly, and actually like singing it and stuff. Because like, we've got DJ Danarchy, and there's other people who are actual like DJs and know how to do that stuff for real. Yeah. I'm not really much of an electronic musician, so I'll probably be trying that, actually like writing something for yours. So hopefully that turns out okay. I haven't really done that yet, but there was something else I wanted to bring up with you. Tulsi Gabbard. I know I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Do you listen to QAnon Anonymous at all?
It's funny you mentioned that. I had just, right before we started recording, I was actually just making lunch and listening to that. I think about Tulsi a lot, and I've thought about. You didn't ask your question yet, and I'm already fucking talking Tulsi.
A lot of us think about her.
I fucking hate Tulsi Gabbard. I've hated Tulsi Gabbard for a long time. I hated Tulsi Gabbard since like when people liked her, when she was like a Bernie surrogate or whatever. I'm really glad they're doing that series, because that, like, she is so emblematic of so many things that like are just mystifying to me about the way that people interact with politics. Sorry, what was the question? You didn't ask a question. I literally interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
I didn't really have much of a question in mind. I was kind of just wanted to put out there that listening to your the series on the Synanon thing, the game that y'all recently put out, did y'all like re-release that recently?
We just re-released the first episode, but it came out, it was on our Patreon, and then a month later we made it public.
Okay. And I obviously, listening to that, which I've listened to that Tulsi Gabbard thing twice the whole way through, both episodes. twice the whole way through because I was like, we had a long drive and I was with my girlfriend, like, you have to hear this. So, obviously I heard a lot of like parallels. I obviously don't know how deep you are into it, but a lot of parallels between that organization and the TrueAnon's. So what was their crap called?
Something life in something
science of identity.
Science of identity. Yeah. I'm only about 30 minutes into it right now, but I was like, it's one of those things where the QA, I mean, it's a fucking pro show.
So
actually, I've recorded a TrueAnon episode from one of those guys' house, which he was so graciously let me use his studio. It's a fantastic show. Then it's one of those things where when they put that out, I was like, "Fuck, I'm so jealous of this. This is really good."
It would have been a good topic for y'all to do as well.
Yeah, and it's also they got Mike Preisner, who's classic guy. I hate Tulsi because she's so obviously a fraud, so transparently a fraud. And that's not even just me saying that like polemically or like, not polemically, like, and hyperbolically or anything like that. Like, I think by any definition of a fraud would include her in it. And this word gets thrown around a lot, but an actual true dyed-in-the-wool grifter. And sort of just astounding. I mean, I had forgotten from the intro of that. I was like, oh my God, I forgot that she not only ran for president in 2020, but endorsed Joe Biden in the primary. I mean, she is just truly a creature that is should not have been able to slink out of the depths, and she really has not only slunk out of the depths, but is just an extraordinary popular figure. I've never met anybody who's actually a Tulsi supporter. No, that's not true. I have. But like I've never met anyone who's a normal Tulsi supporter. Everyone I've met is just like a total fucking freak wingnut. And so I don't know. That's I hate Tulsi Gabbard.
I mean, I was, when she was in the debates and stuff, which that's those episodes of TrueAnon that I mentioned where y'all were those specific debates, with the Democratic primary debates in 2020. I think at that time, or I just didn't know that much about her. And, I just knew like, she's from Hawaii, at least very blue state, so thinking like, well, anybody who had political success there is probably not like a horrible piece of crap. And then she endorsed Bernie. All right. Okay. She seems all right. She talks about not being against war in a very vague way. So that's
very vague way.
Cool, I guess. And then of course, like, all the, that a lot of that unraveled, but man, that, I always assumed, she was in a cult, or she used to have like really anti-gay, viewpoints and stuff. I always just assumed that was like she had some kind of association with a cult when she was younger, and that we don't know a whole lot about. And the anti-gay stuff was probably like something like what Obama was. I'm evolving on this issue kind of crap. But man, way, way worse than I ever would have thought.
Yeah.
Really twisting in the wind, or just changing.
I mean, my God, the woman's a weather vane.
Yeah. I was, I guess, since you didn't get too deep into that, like, and like I said, I just got like so much information from that about what the deal with that cult she came out of is, and how deeply involved with it she was and still is. Did you see some like parallels between the TrueAnon stuff that you went through in that?
It's funny. I don't think I've actually listened enough for the show to really keep that to get a clearer picture of that. But I think with all of these things with cults and stuff like that, I mean, ours was not a religious cult, although TrueAnon itself did technically become a religion. That was really just a tax thing. They were not really actually religious. But yeah, I mean, there's just like parallels of the way that you keep people controlled, and especially the focus on like keeping that second generation, the generation of children born into that, invested in it. I think that, there's parallels between essentially any organization like that. But yeah, so I guess the answer would be, I haven't particularly thought enough about that to give actually an intelligent answer. But I mean, they're both fucking cults, and they're both cults that have a particular emphasis on kind of keeping the new brood in. and I also have Synanon started out having bizarre sexual practices and ended up having bizarre sexual practices. But both, I guess you could find, I'm sure I'll listen to it with kind of a closer ear and get back to you on that essentially.
All right. Yeah. And that, by the way, we didn't really talk about that much, but anybody listening, the game series, it's how many parts? A 5-part?
5 parts. Yeah.
On TrueAnon, goes like very in depth and is totally fascinating and highly recommend that. And then you were I listened to that episode of Chapo Trap House.
Oh yeah, the other day.
Recently, yeah. Did you how do you know those guys? I know like there was you had one of them, was it Matt Chrisman, on like a very early episode?
Yeah, I think like our first episode. I just know them through like Twitter. I started using Twitter in 2015 and like kind of met them through that.
Okay. Well, I have like a lightning round, but we've already been going over an hour. So I'll just kind of, do you have, I guess, like recommendations, any like, I was kind of, if we don't have a lot to talk about, I'll do like the high fidelity thing and like favorite movies, favorite directors, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, what you said, you don't really watch movies. Are there any movies that you like really like?
I like The Long Goodbye by Robert Altman. About based on the Raymond Chandler book. That's my favorite movie. It's got Elliot Gould in it. I like Dark Passages with Humphrey Bogart. I like a lot of Humphrey Bogart movies.
So old school taste.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I grew up watching a lot of noir films, and so that's kind of like where all my taste is oriented. I've also read like, I don't know, it's like 10 Raymond Chandler books, and they made so many fucking movies out of his books. But yeah, I guess those are a couple of my favorite movies. Yeah, I don't know. I like, Starship Troopers. That's a great movie.
That is a great movie. Great political movie.
Yeah. Actually, that is. But yeah, I would say far and above Long Goodbye is my favorite movie.
Okay. And we already talked about music quite a bit. You said who'd you say would probably be your favorite band?
Oh, I don't know if I said my favorite band. Oh, Thin Lizzy. Yeah.
Thin Lizzy.
Thin Lizzy is definitely my favorite band.
Okay, that's a great choice for favorite band, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. So those who are shaking their heads, there's a lot more to Thin Lizzy than the boys are back in town.
Yeah, no, that I always just kind of forget that is Thin Lizzy's song, because it doesn't really sound like the other stuff that I've been exposed to anyway. Being a musician, yeah. I've been around a lot of other, like, that's a band that a lot of musicians really like respect and love. So I've heard them a lot.
And if the guitar playing, they got the fucking twin leads like nobody else does. Scott Gorham.
Yeah, fantastic. Like guitar harmonies and stuff.
Yeah,
really cool. The what other podcasts do you listen to? We mentioned QAnon Anonymous. Are you a podcast listener, or do you not like?
Funnily enough, I'm not a huge podcast listener. Because a lot of the times, like when I'm at work, or I'm doing work rather, like I can't listen to something else. I would say the podcast I listen to every episode of would be a podcast called E1, which is kind of like in the same sphere as us. E1. It's just like a funny podcast. It's not like, it's really funny. I think they're great. And I would say I listen to all the other ones. I listen to Chapo sometimes. I listen to QAnon Anonymous sometimes. It's really more just like I don't have time rather than like a taste thing at all. Mm-hmm. Of course I love all those guys. I just like don't have. I tend to listen to music more when I'm doing stuff. And are there any other ones that like I listen to? Oh, Ghost Stories to the End of the World, I think is really good. That's like especially for people who like our show. That guy's like way more smart than me, and like deals a lot of the same subjects. But yeah, that's basically Death is Around the Corner is great. But those are all just kind of shows in our sphere, I guess. I don't really listen to other ones like outside of it. I don't. Yeah, it's. I'll say it's for the purity of my own art that I don't listen to other ones, so that I can't steal from anybody.
So like, hold on just a second. Hey, GW, could you close this door? Fancy opened it. Sorry, my dog just shoved the door open. But sorry, what were we talking about? Yeah, can you lure her out too, so you're not jingling around. She can stay in here. It's fine. Just go ahead and close it. Sorry. Oh yeah, I guess another question that I like to ask sometimes is like, what are there any like lib commentators who like? A big answer I always get from people is like John Oliver. It's like, yeah, I mean, he's kind of a kind of progressive liberal. His politics aren't though like aligned with mine perfectly, but he does like really good work. Are there any like liberal, more like kind of centrist kind of liberal news sources that you ever like?
Well, news sources. There's a lot of news sources. I any news source, as long as it's right, I think, or it's like saying something true. I will read even the ones that aren't saying anything true. John Oliver, I think, is almost excruciatingly unfunny, and so I actually can't watch John Oliver. I hate his style of humor. It's too. His fucking like joke voice drives me to suicide.
I think I might know what you mean. Like I enjoy it to a degree, but there's something about his comedic affect that seems a little, I don't know what I'd say, like fake, a little too. It's just like too wooden. I just don't think he can tell a joke very well, but he does have interesting stuff on there sometimes. I haven't seen him like over a year. No, I don't think there really are any commentators I enjoy. Like individuals. I mean, I think there's people who do good reporting and stuff like that, but like, no, not really. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, that's, most people, like, I think, people on the left are it's good to keep an eye out for more mainstream sources that you feel like that you can trust, because leftist like news organizations or whatever like just don't have the resources.
Don't have a lot of juice. Well, it's not that I don't like imbibe any of them. It's just I don't really like any of them. In fact, I dislike most of them, even the ones that I like. But I mean, I guess I read the New York Times every day.
Okay.
But they suck.
Sure. So, the failing New York Times, right?
Exactly. They're so not failing that it makes me insane. They're the only newspaper that's not failing in America, because they like have all that other shit like Wordle and like fucking anyways. They're not failing, unfortunately.
Yeah, what's the opposite of failing? Successful.
Yeah, successful.
Succeeding.
Times. Yeah.
Okay, so we thank you so much for being so generous with your time here today, Mr. Belden. I want to ask you one more thing, kind of a corny question, but if you could snap your fingers and change one thing about the U.S. government specifically, what would it be? Like, if that were possible to do, you can choose to answer it in many different ways, like what would have the best like chain reaction, or what is the single most important thing? What do you think is like most fucked up that you wish you could snap your fingers?
For sure, definitely we'd have a baby president.
Okay.
With absolute dictatorial power. So like baby, like, I mean, it would kind of mostly be focused on itself. I don't think we really have a conception of like what a country is or anything like that, but I think we should have a baby as a president. Actually, I think that every member of government should be a baby. So like senators, Congress, and all that kind of stuff. It would paralyze the country. I mean, we wouldn't really have a government at that point. Yeah. But I think it would be so adorable.
Yeah, I think we could maybe do like a mix of babies and puppies and other various cute things. I don't know if there's like maybe something in the Constitution or some crap about you can't have a dog in office, but
it's actually nothing in the Constitution that says you can't have a dog as president.
Well, then that means you can, right? So that's how that works. The thing, the imagination thing, that's one reason I love like working with kids, is because I don't relate to a lot of adults because they, have no imagination and curiosity and stuff. And like, there's somebody who works with younger people. I can tell you that would at least be something that would be much better about having a government run by babies. A little more, I think it would be a little more innovative. Yeah,
agreed. I think there should definitely be a baby. I'd love to be represented by a baby.
All right. Well, that would be also adorable. I think that.
So cute.
Yeah, just making more things adorable, appreciating the cuteness inherent in so many aspects of life would make things a lot better.
Yeah.
Well, could you please tell my audience where they can find you, follow, or unless if there's anything else you'd like to add, some loose thread you want to tie up. Otherwise, what's some stuff you want to promote and that kind of stuff?
I do a podcast called TrueAnon. It's on all podcast platforms. Patreon.com/TrueAnon. I think maybe it might be TrueAnon podcast, but we're the only TrueAnon on there, so you'll find it.
Okay, and in the description of this episode, I will definitely put the links and stuff for people to find y'all on your various social medias and whatnot. And I'll mention it in the intro and that kind of stuff. But thanks again so much for your time and attention and all that stuff and your wise words, I would say.
Thank you.
And have a wonderful holiday.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right, peace easy. Woo-ha, what a great chat that was. I hope y'all loved that, at least a fraction of how much I did. And I hope you dug the theme song. Note to self, maybe cut this part out here, but
Turd in the graveyard.
Tune in next time when my guest will be YouTuber and awesome musician / songwriter Intellectual Darkwave. I should go back to the intro and put in something about that. Check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Hoss Bossman, or just search YouTube for Hoss Bossman. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Twit, which is short for Twitch, at Hoss_Bossman. Join the Patreon, find me on TikTok, and find all my crap at www.hoss.fun for all your Hoss needs. And please rate and review this podcast to help a Hoss out. I love you deeply, madly, etc. Gonna write out on one of my original serious songs from my band having days. Let's see. I'm gonna go with an unreleased, pre-mixed and mastered song from the last EP we recorded but never released. Someday I'm gonna have that EP finished and release it somehow. For now, enjoy this exclusive undownloadable track called Low Paradise from our unreleased album from 10-15 years ago. Oh, and as always, at your earliest convenience, between appointments, whatever, flood the souls of all sentient beings you encounter with healing light. Mwah.
There's a plan the good killers know. Get your back straight and narrow to a pack to attack. Go on any you back, any tribe to survive past the fifth of a crack. Those poor motherfuckers just throwing up salute in the land of free and willing recruits. Hey, it's just another day in our low paradise. Staying in pretty when the sun sets over the power lines. In this great debate, I don't see it any but me to people wanna stay, but deep down inside it's gotta be killing you. What is there to value? Just a model to make all this shit that you hate, that you need to succeed in the material state. And hey, while we're at it, just shoot it, find success. When you find out I want that fucker's address, hey, it's just another day in our